We'll start with the Irish Independent this morning, and it is disgusted Conte set for a bitter Blues exit. Lawyers haggle over a £9 million payoff as players pay tribute following manager's departure. It's an unusual situation at Chelsea, unusual in the grand scheme of things, but probably predictable when it comes to the hierarchy that actually exists at Chelsea. It seems that Antonio Conte is holding out and not going to take another job so that he can get a £9 million payoff. Chelsea don't really want to pay the £9 million naturally, so there's going to be a bit of a legal standoff between Conte's people and the Chelsea hierarchy. Why the hell are they dealing with this now and not 6 weeks ago?
God forbid you ever leave Newstalk on, you know. It's going to be, it just seems a very dysfunctional club, doesn't it, you know, and it's just sad the way that to turn up at training and be told you were gone pretty much.
Yeah, the other couple of stories on the back of the Irish Independent this morning is Staunton admits walkout decision not taken lightly. Of course, Staunton saying that the decision, as I say, hadn't been taken lightly. She doesn't really say much. She was speaking last night and doesn't want to say anything until after their game against Cavan at the weekend. And we'll move on to the Irish Examiner this morning because they lead with a story we want to chat about. It's Dan Dare. Stunning stage win means tour already a success for Dan Martin, and a success it is. An unbelievable performance from Dan Martin yesterday. It's a sensational conclusion to his stage 6 at the Moor de Britannia, the Wall of Brittany as they call it, Johnny. A big climb at the end. Martin breaks away with 1,200 metres to go, surges ahead of the field. Sky and BMC try to catch him, they can't, and Dan Martin holds out for the win. I think we can actually hear a little bit of Dan Martin. He was speaking to reporters after the stage win yesterday.
To be honest, my first thought is that I really hope my wife hasn't just gone into labour. You know, it's a great feeling to actually get a win again. So many second places at the tour since the last one, and Also, I was a bit nervous because of the headwind. I didn't think it was going to happen, you know, but. Then the race went so hard at the first part of the climb that I saw everybody's on the limit and there's no teammates left, so why not have a try? So I did.
Yeah, Dan Martin there speaking after winning the stage. It's his second time winning a stage at the Tour de France, and he's come close a couple of other times. Like he finished 6th overall last year. He came 2nd on the Planche de Béfi last year, which was kind of one of those amazing stages where he came so close to winning that exact stage, and like coming 6th overall. He was really in the picture for the entire thing last year, chasing down Chris Froome, but it didn't happen for him. Then 2016, you had another 2nd place and a 2nd place as well on the stage in 2015. So a couple of runners up spots over the last couple of years. This was coming, and it was an impressive feat. Wasn't a great start to the season for him as a whole, but this has really made it for him. And like
his missus is expecting twins as well. I think he spoke about that afterwards. They got a positive scan on that.
Yeah.
So good times for Dan Martin at the moment.
Absolutely, yeah. I think she's due in October. So he was saying afterwards, I hope she doesn't go into labour after all of this. It's like it's an unusual one, isn't it? Like watching the Tour de France kind of from a neutral perspective and kind of sitting there. Like I love watching it. I love watching every stage whenever I possibly can. There's something beautiful about it, obviously, but also the competitive nature of it when it gets to the last couple of kilometres, especially inside 10 kilometres. I'm usually glued to the TV to see what happens. And it's like I wouldn't have necessarily been into the Tour as much when Martin last won a stage at the Tour, which was the last time an Irish person won a stage at the Tour. So it's an odd feeling because, like, naturally we're always casting a sceptical eye on the entire thing. And when an Irishman wins it, you don't really know how to when they win a stage. You don't really know how to feel.
That's the terrible thing about cycling now, isn't it? You know, it's just hard to. I guess. Just with so much controversy, I would have virtually no interest in cycling for a lot for that reason, because I don't know what to believe anymore, you know. And I would say there are probably issues in football that people, you know, aren't aware of as well, and we don't think about that, and you know, it's not fair on cyclists. But yeah, I'd just be very sceptical. It's just so extreme that, you know.
Like in general, like I mean, it's not like nothing to do with Dan Martin or anything. It's just
absolutely
like once you're casting a sceptical eye on a sport in general,
absolutely,
you know, it's just a strange sensation.
It's like me trying to tell people about horse racing that it's not corrupt. Like, and you know, I might be telling people till they're blue in the face, but I'm not going to be able to convince some people that racing isn't, you know, entirely free of a bit of skullduggery, like which it obviously isn't. But it's a bit like that. It's just kind of some people won't. Some people, the amount of taxi drivers who tell me Irish racing is corrupt, like, you know, I'd never bet that, and I'm like, well, sure, I'm not going to convince you otherwise in the course of this cab ride, but I guess cycling's in a place that it's going to be hard to convince people.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing.
And I'm by no means suggesting Dan Martin did anything, you know.
No, of course not.
But I think for the journeyman cyclist to win a stage must be terrific.
Yeah, like I think for Dan Martin, I think he's like a good bit above a journeyman cyclist, but like he will be a contender. He obviously had a very bad start to this tour. Obviously had a brilliant tour last year with Team UAE at the moment, and like all his teammates were just delighted for him. He's clearly their team leader and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be interesting to see how he performs once he comes into the mountains. Like he said, he was like running on adrenaline really yesterday, the way nobody caught him. He went so early. Like he was 1,200 meters to go, and on that
thinking
walk,
he's gonna die and fade, and he just holds on.
Yeah, like it's hard to kind of appreciate it on TV, but there is one camera angle when they're coming up right behind the breakaway when you can actually see the gradient, and it is steep. It is a steep finish. Like I think he came second on the Wall of Brittany as well a couple of years ago, the last time a stage finished there. So like it is, in fair, like all things considered, it is a remarkable achievement. Like added to Sam Bennett, like it's just a fact that it has been a successful year for Irish cycling, regardless of what your view is.
It's becoming very popular in general in Ireland as well in terms of the actual activity.
Well, naturally, I guess it's the same with any water sports. It's the same with like we've got plenty of like gradients ourselves in the country. Like even Ian Reardon was doing a piece with him in the Irish Times last month, which we actually want to talk about now, because he was just saying that he was just going up through slopes in and around Ireland, down in Wicklow and stuff, and that was part of his tune-up after the Dauphiné, or maybe before the Dauphiné, before the Tour de France, and that Ireland is actually a good enough place for a GC contender in the Tour de France to actually train. Now, it's not heavy training, but it is training of some sort. You can keep yourself fine-tuned here. So you're right, it's a country conducive to success in the sport. But when it comes to Dan Martin, like naturally you have to apply the same scrutiny of him as you have to of every other cyclist. And the one thing that you could definitely use as a stick to beat him with is just his attitude towards doping. And he's spoken about it before. Paul Kimmage did an interview with him last year in the Sunday Independent, where he had some interesting views on seeing doping firsthand and his relationship with it, and how he was kind of abhorred by teammates even suggesting that they would do anything like that, and how he's very principled and would never ever touch it. And then this year he was asked about Chris Froome last month, and that came up in the paper review on Sunday with Joe Dermot-Gillespie and Paul Kimmage at Ballyliffin. Have a look at this.
And look at the winner. You do look at the winner, because everybody has a contribution to make here, including our own Irish professionals. I mean, Christ almighty, I saw an interview with Dan Martin a couple of weeks ago where he's saying he can't comment on the Froome case because there's a clause in his contract where he's going to get. But look, you're not going to get it. You can't have it both ways. You either stand up for clean sport and express your honest views about this, or you don't. And the result is what we've seen in the last couple of days of the tour. When you don't do that, you know, you guys get a lot of flack on off the ball for not interviewing them. And, you know...
It's difficult to interview them and know on what premise you're doing the interview on.
Well, absolutely.
What are we assuming here?
But what you're perfectly entitled to ask them is the state of the game, and, you know, to ask them about doping in the sport and where that is now. But if they're going to come back and say, well, actually, there's a clause in my contract that says I can't discuss that, well, I'm sorry, tough.
So just to tell you exactly what the comments were that Paul Kimmage is referring to there, he was speaking, the place where I read the comments anyway was with Ian Reardon in the Irish Times. He might have been speaking elsewhere as well. And this was before the WADA ruling on Chris Froome, before WADA said it's okay for Chris Froome to ride in the Tour de France. So Dan Martin said, I'm not technically allowed to comment on it. The team told me not to, but I don't really care. We don't know anything, do we? It sounds horrible sitting on the fence, but we don't know the facts, and it's hard to comment. It's a situation we're in. Nobody knows anything, not even his own teammates know anything. It's all kept very hushed, and when we find out the facts, then we can make a comment. But for the time being, either way, it's a mystery as to what seemed to have happened. I don't think it affects my race that much at all, whether he's there or not. I'm just going to focus on what I'm doing, and then if he is there, he's just one more person to beat. So I don't really care is the line that kind of stuck out to me there.
I think that's slightly unfair on Dan, though, as well. You know, maybe, you know, he's a cyclist. These are colleagues and peers of his. Like, you know, he's not condoning anything there. You know,
no, of course he's not.
I wouldn't be too harsh on him. And Paul Kimmage has obviously built a strong career around, like, you know, going after cheats and all that. And you know, he obviously is still extremely vehement when it comes to stuff like that. But I wouldn't be too hard on Dan there.
Yeah. The thing is, whenever I see comments like that from any cyclist, and again, if I saw this from a cyclist that wasn't Irish, I'm thinking to myself, well, you know, the biggest problem with cycling over the past forever really has been...
Why is his Irishness of any relevance?
Because suddenly to be fair...
All is fine.
Yeah, like all is fine. That's what you naturally think. No, that's not what you naturally think. You start to change your view on things because it's like, well, surely one of our own countrymen
would never.
You would never. But that's not what I'm trying to say here. What I'm trying to say is about the quotes, about what if I don't know, like a non-Irish cyclist said the exact same thing here. The first thing I'm saying is, well, the problem with cycling over the past forever, as I said, was omerta. It's, you know, like not saying anything about other cyclists. And to be fair, Dan Martin doesn't have to say anything. As you said there, he doesn't have to say anything. He's not the person under question here. It was Chris Froome under question, and he doesn't have to kind of comment on it. But ultimately, that is the reason why cycling was in a hole and dug itself deeper into the hole, was because nobody was willing to speak out about it. But, you know, if you're in Dan Martin's position, what do you do? Like, just to kind of finish up on this point, the Paul Kimmage piece from last year, as I mentioned, Paul Kimmage talks about joining a new team in 2008 or up until 2008. So Martin talks about finishing second overall at the Val d'Aosta in Italy. Slipstream, which is an American team run by Jonathan Vaughters at the time, were at the race, and he got a call from them afterwards to turn pro. He didn't want to rush it. He'd only just started to be successful again, and didn't want to have pro and have his arse handed to him, as he said. So Jonathan agreed to delay it for a year. Kimmage says until 2008. Dan Martin says yes. Paul Kimmage says, was there any other suitors? And then Martin says, I probably could have gone to any of the French teams, but I respected the fact that Slipstream had come in first, and their anti-doping philosophy, they were the first team to say, we are not going to use needles. We are not going to turn a blind eye to this. It wasn't popular. A lot of the other teams resented them for it, but it was exactly what I wanted to hear. So Dan Martin has spoken about this previously and has said, this is my stance, this is where I'm at, and, you know, the unusual stance of a no needles policy was something that I supported. So he's on the record as saying that, and maybe taking that into account, maybe that's why personally I'm looking at those Froome comments as a little bit disappointing.
But
ultimately, the one definite here is that we watched him on the Moor de Bretagne yesterday with a sensational performance. It's going to be very interesting to see how he does as the tour moves into the Alps and to the Pyrenees over the next couple of weeks. It's a fairly grueling tour coming up. They go to Roubaix in a couple of days as well, which is all cobblestone. So, like, he could suffer a puncture, anybody could suffer a puncture and fall 10 minutes behind on the cobblestone. So anything is likely to change. It's a magnificent achievement for anybody to win a stage of the Tour de France. And as I say, himself and Sam Bennett really kind of casting a light on Irish cycling and the success stories this year. So there's no question about that. They are the facts that we have in front of us. We will move swiftly on. We want to get to Mike Quirk in the next couple of moments. On the front page of the Irish Times sports section this morning is... It's coming home, a big part of England's downfall. That's Ken Early's piece. And Croatia trump England in jingoism. That's Emmett Malone's piece there on Sports Friday in the Irish Times. The back page of the Times Ireland edition then this morning is Sarri lined up to replace sacked Conte, and Bray squad may strike over wages. Johnny, we'll get to this a little bit later on in the show. The Bray story, it's really gone to a different level entirely now at this point. It's when was the last time they got paid?
Yeah, the last time they got paid was the 25th of May.
Right.
It's actually tragic because obviously, as we'll show here, you know, we're in the middle of the LOI in Europe, which is the best time of the year really to be League of Ireland fan, when the teams are taking on better opposition like Legia Warsaw in Europe. And the back page of the Times there is about Bray Wanderers players going on strike.
Yeah.
And I'm not blaming the Times.
No, of course. Like there's only one place to blame there, really, isn't it? The front page of the Racing Post then is Alpha Female, Harrington's brilliant Royal Ascot winner Alpha Centauri out to take control in the Falmouth Stakes on day 2 of the July Festival. You actually just mentioned this before we came on air. Alpha Centauri, a good chance today?
She's obviously a hot favourite today, but she's a real superstar, you know, and Jessica Harrington has kind of come into flat horses a bit later on in her career. She's, I think Jessie's 71 now, but this is one of... This filly's performance at Royal Ascot, she could be an absolute sensation, and she'll be one of those horses today people just cannot see beaten, but she's physically a monster, and she's a hell of a filly, really is.
You've got the tabloids there?
I do. So, well done is obviously the Irish Daily Mirror. Kenny's Lily White's do us proud, a great win in Estonia, and obviously as a pro League of Ireland man, I think it's lovely to see that they've given so much stock to probably a routine enough win for Dundalk against Levadia Tallinn that I think most people expected. You know, the other three teams didn't. The other three teams all lost, but Dundalk have kind of set a higher bar really in Europe. The Herald roar for 4, Kieran Whelan on why his series test from Donegal exactly what Dublin need. And obviously that's something to get very excited about over the weekend. The start of the Super 8s and Dan's tour de force, which is. Go with that. Tour de force.
Tour de force.
Happy enough with that?
Yep.
Martin targets overall victory after a stage win. Rossies make 2 changes. I couldn't but note the John Small failed attempt to get his ban turned around was mentioned there. And I actually met him lately because he's into the horses, and he insists. John Small, he loves the horses, and he insisted. You know, I play a bit on the edge, but I did not mean to strike him at all. It was just purely, and I believed him anyway.
It did, like, he went for the ball, didn't he?
He did. It looked worse than it was, kind of, you know. And
it was just kind of funny when you were listening to some of the comments afterwards. People saying like he accidentally punched him in the face.
Yeah.
Like,
in fairness to John, he's an intelligent lad. He's not going to do that in a game of no consequence either.
Naturally.
But he's had a tricky campaign with injuries and suspensions. So let's just hope it picks up from out for the Conte, Sarri in waiting. Obviously, we dealt with that. Wham Martin as well. And Delight for Town on the Dylan 1. Dylan Conley, Cryomia River. Kyle Walker looks good at chilling out in the cryotherapy bath. It's the last thing you need after, you know, what happened there. And the long goodbye. And Tallinn in a day's work in the Irish Daily Star, which is obviously a play on all in the day's work. I'm actually getting tired going through all these puns here at this hour of the morning.
It's tough work.
And Peter backs Hart. Yet another Tyrone person comes out and defends Mickey Hart. It seems to be sacrosanct. If you're from Tyrone, you know, it's kind of like if you're from Pyongyang, you're not going to criticise, you know, the great leader. But it's amazing in Tyrone. They just never seem to criticise Mickey Hart.
Joe Rowley, except for Sean Kavanagh, of course.
Sean Kavanagh, fair enough. Probably the only person I can think of, maybe. But did I get through the Daily Mail? I did.
The Daily Telegraph, I think, is up next. Here we go. So Gareth, where do we go from here? Couple of columnists there, and
I've missed this now, so I've missed the analysis of this Croatia, you know, defeat or whatever, and just my overriding thought about the game was, why were they so deep for so long, holding on to a lead? And it's like, I think it's some part of our psyche as well. We probably would have done the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Do we not have the belief in this part of the world to just take teams on that really we should be beaten? And I mean that when I say we, I mean England in this case. Like, and even the League of Ireland guy last night was talking to me about Shamrock Rovers' defeat. He was like, going in there just not believing you're going to win the game. But I was with England, like 1-0, you're in control. Why not assert that control? And they were just so negative, I thought.
Yeah, it's true.
Fear?
Like, it can't be fear. It can't be, unless the whole England's coming home, the whole confidence that was built up around the squad. Like, they were, like, when, I'm not sure, did you see the Roy Keane on ITV clip where...
I didn't actually.
But, like, basically he's mentioning about England getting ahead of themselves, talking about the final, which, to be fair, was more to do with the media, more to do with the fans. But there was an element of that in the squad where they felt that they were the favourites going into the Croatia match. So...
Which they were.
Maybe it was, like, it seems that they just abandoned their plan, and their plan was actually they're decent at keeping the ball when they abide by the Southgate tactics, despite the fact that they don't have a Luka Modric or an Ivan Rakitic. Like, in my opinion, it was to do with a tactical deficiency that they just abandoned it rather than a lack of a Modric in that midfield, which is why they abandoned it, as you say, why they sat so deep.
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of fear as well, that they realised the closer they got to it, they realised. But I couldn't believe early in the second half just how conservative they were playing, you know.
Yeah, let's go to the Irish News. The headline here is Gaelfast forward. Donnelly highlights has ambitions for project to revive Gaelic games in Belfast. We want to reach out to Protestant community is a quote there. Of course, Belfast and Antrim in general, a huge potential on that market.
This is something, that's actually something I was talking about recently, how probably the biggest failing you could think of in the history of Gaelic games is its inability to attract Protestants to the sport and to the... I know some of the border counties in the south would have Protestants playing for them, and you know, you see in Dublin now as well, like kind of posher parts of Dublin are becoming actually very strong in terms of Gaelic games. But the whole Arlene Foster thing, you know, and it's a point I've made, I just think this kind of emphasis on cultural nationalism that's entailed in the GAA experience is completely anachronistic at this stage. You know, you look at the Ireland under-18 athletics team, you know, the amount of mixed race kids now we have. You look at Gavin Bazuna, the Rovers keeper last night. We're changing as a nation, and we have to attract kids from different backgrounds to games, but specifically the Protestant community in the north. And we're not going to attract Protestants to play Gaelic games if we insist on, like, you know, playing old Republican tunes before All-Ireland finals and all this emphasis on flags and anthems and all this, you know. It must have been difficult for Arlene Foster to go to that game, but there's a massive section of the island of Ireland which does not play Gaelic games, and it's an absolute tragedy, because every time I go up to East Belfast or anywhere like that, I always leave and say I want to bring you to a hurling game because there's nothing like it. But the 5 minutes before the start with the Artane Boys band, you know, and then the national anthem, I'd be like, ugh. I'd feel a bit edgy.
It's a very good point about the Protestant community. I do think
there's absolutely no reason.
No reason whatsoever.
Just like a Catholic should be playing cricket.
True. Like the thing with, like, you've got your own views on cricket, but in terms of why you should or shouldn't be playing it. But anyway,
you have.
No, you do. I want to remember the last time we were in studio together was the week of the Australian cricket fiasco, where let's just say we kind of took the piss a little bit too much about the Australian situation.
I'd forgotten about that. I don't have no issue at all with cricket. I think in the south anyway, we're becoming a really secular nation, and we just play into different sports, and it's just.
I do think the GAA has tapped into a multicultural community.
Yeah,
like it is to do with, when you look above the border, when you look about the lack of people in Belfast who are playing the games, like there's definitely a point in that.
I've seen that map of Ireland by GAA counties, so it's dotted all over, and you see the parts where it's quite a little bit sparser is sort of part of where we're from, maybe in the west, where it's like, you know, the west of Galway City is quite barren in terms of population. But then when you go to the north, it's basically like spot the Protestant community, because that's not where our pitch is.
Yeah.
And that should not be the case. And it's a big cultural bridge for the Gaelic Athletic Association to overcome, because it's just, you're talking of 140 years or whatever it is of basically this, and it's particularly in the north. Like, for a Protestant in the south to play Gaelic games probably isn't that big of a deal, but it is in the north. And the Gaelic, like, you're talking about the guts of 1 million people there who've no interest really in Gaelic games. That should not be the case, because we have great sports. How could they not enjoy a game of hurling? Like,
it's true, because like when you make the point about the Irish athletics, like obviously athletics is an international sport, but then you look at the multiculturalism involved at some of the underage teams, like Stefan O'Cunbar with Kerry, who got man of the match in their under-20 Munster final. They're one of their goalkeepers, I think he's the sub-goalkeeper at this point, with Lithuanian parents. Like, those parents are coming to the country with no idea of what Gaelic games are, so the GAA has appealed to them on a natural level.
So, like, when did you, without going over the point here, when the Gaelic Athletic Association was set up in the 19th century, it was an attempt to counter what was British, Ireland becoming British in effect, which it was, and it was like, we need to assert our own kind of culture here to the medium of sport, and it's been phenomenally successful. But we're not living in the 19th century anymore. We have to completely, in my view, we have to pretty much start to abandon all the cultural nationalism that goes along with it, because it's anachronistic, and it's actually alienating people more than bringing them in my view.
Yeah, no, I think there's no question about that. In sections of Ireland, the alienation is real. It is. Like, how can it not be? Like, how can it not be if you see the symbolism of it? And like, I'll sing the national anthem.
It could start with changing the national anthem as well. You know what I mean? And that's not the Gaelic Games, Gaelic Athletic Association's prerogative, but it's a long road ahead for us to get Protestants interested in the greatest sport in the world, which is hurling.
Yeah.